is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction.
Welcome to the third episode of the Liberty Lifestyle Podcast. In this episode, Tyler sits down with Bill Church of the Free Your Mind podcast to discuss his Liberty lifestyle. Bill is an experienced dog trainer, truth seeker, student of the Trivium method, and his podcast helps to bring out critical information used to free your mind. Tyler and Bill discuss various important topics surrounding the human condition, including social engineering, mind control, cannabis oil, community, healing, and seeking truth. Please subscribe to the Liberty Lifestyles Podcast website and follow us on our social media platforms. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We look forward to having you with us in the future on Liberty Lifestyle Podcast, giving truth the liberty of appearing.
Alright guys, so we're going to welcome Bill Church onto the Liberty Lifestyle Podcast today, and we thank Bill for coming on the show. And he goes by Bow Wow Bill as well, and Bill is a truth seeker, and you can find his works where he hosts a podcast at the Free Your Mind podcast at libsyn.com, or just Free Your Mind podcast in a Google search, you'll find it. And Bill, we're going to kind of get into a little bit more of your background at first if we can. Tell us a little bit about yourself and go back as far as you'd like. Take as much time as you'd like. You know, where did you grow up?
Well, thank you for having me on, Tyler. It's a pleasure to join you here, man. And anybody that wants to check out the podcast that I do, also just freeyourmindpodcast.com should get you there. I grew up in Boise, Idaho. I was born on November 22nd, which is the anniversary of John F. Kennedy's assassination. And I was born in 1976, which is the bicentennial celebration, the 200th year celebration of the United States of America. And my initials are William, or WTC, which I think are funny because that, kind of also stands for the World Trade Center. I've always had just this drive to really, really dig beneath the surface, not take things at face value, to look into them, to do some investigation, and to also look towards stuff that might be viewed as kind of the darker side of humanity. And I grew up in Boise. I was the only boy in my whole family, and in the extended family we had 13 girls, and so I'm the only boy out of 13 girls, and that gave me a lot of time to myself to do some self-exploration, and but it also gave me time to be okay with being alone, being by myself. But I've always wanted a friend, and so I always begged my parents to get me a dog. And when I was 8 years old, they get me my first dog, and I really, really hit it off with this animal. And at 12 years old, I got another dog, and I learned how to really train this dog formally. And I decided right then and there, this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. And so I have devoted my life to training dogs. That's what I do for a living. I help people with their dogs, and love to work with my dogs as well. And working with behavior kind of gives you a unique insight on life, and especially conditioned responses. And what I saw with the dogs responding kind of was reflected when I would ask people tough questions about social structures or anything that might, kind of make them think twice. I was receiving these conditioned responses from people, and that got me really interested on what the heck is this coming from? Where are these people getting their responses? It doesn't matter if you are an old man or a young lady. If I asked you, for instance, if I brought up a subject about the police or order followers, or I would receive the same response, like there's bad people out there. We need these guys, or if you don't like it, then get out. Just stuff like that I would receive over and over again, and that really got me interested on how this world really works and what are the unforeseen mechanisms of influence in society that are causing people to not really think about the overall picture and the life that they live. Instead, they're getting this canned response that is already positioned and ready for them to say it. And it just perplexed the hell out of me. And it just got me really, really investigating into secret societies, occulted information, stuff like that. And once you start down that rabbit hole, it's kind of hard to stop. And so that's where I have, found many, many different teachers, Mark Passio, Jordan Maxwell, David Icke, Michael Tessarion, Freeman Fly, just to name a few. And even Alex Jones has helped me out tremendously with my waking up process and just seeing how this world really works. But, as you start to unfold this, you start to realize that more people need to be speaking the truth. And that's what inspired me after attending the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. I wanted to bring it back home and to start to produce my own platform and to start, talking about the stuff that I have learned about through the various years of truth seeking. And so that's what inspired me to start the Free Your Mind podcast. And we just recorded our 102nd episode this week with Bob Tuskin. And it's been a real pleasure. I mean, I never would have in a million years thought that I would have this podcast and starting to gain popularity. And I think that it's really cool that people are interested in this information. And, it just confirms that I'm doing the right thing and I will continue to do so.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for that. And you brought up a lot there. The fact that your birth date and all that, and even your initials, is quite significant. The 200 bicentennial founding of America, is that what you said?
Yeah, 1976 is the year I was born.
Right. Okay, great. And then the WTC, that is pretty interesting. And then the JFK birth date, every time you've brought that up on your show, I do quite find that quite interesting. And did you just say you had 14 sisters growing up? Did I hear that correctly?
Extended family, so we all grew up in Boise together and lived very close together, but extended was 13 girls in the whole family, so my first cousins, my sisters, and me as well. My grandma would refer to me, since I was the only boy in the whole family, as number one before she passed away and went to heaven, and I took, a lot of honor and a lot of pride with that name that my grandma gave me.
Nice, yeah. We have a lot of girls in my family too. I see what you mean now, yeah. And then the dogs, and then the early childhood dog experience, that's quite interesting for where you're at now, and the conditioned responses that you brought up after that. And I think working with animals, we'll probably get into this a little bit later, has helped you to kind of see something in human beings, and also something that the social engineers saw that they wanted to try to start to bring into their own little sick reality. But then we also, the Alex Jones, I don't mind Alex Jones. I watch Alex Jones a lot, but as of late, he's quite gone off the deep end. Something's going on there. We always have to be careful. You can't just hold somebody to their old work and say their new work's going to be on point. We always have to still be paying attention to the Stefan Molyneux, Alex Jones phenomena. And Free Your Mind podcast obviously has been tremendous work. I'm willing to talk about that more here because you've really brought on like a whole collage. I mean, the name and where you're at this point goes along perfectly because it's an entire tapestry at this point, and you really kind of have to strap in to go down some of the episodes. I even recently brushed up on a few. I've listened to all of the podcast, some episodes multiple times. And yeah, I mean, the other night, man, one of the episodes where you had the lady on recently talking about the infrastructure and the EMP potentials and whatnot. I was in my basement seeding some new seedlings for the next growing season, and just sitting there kind of feeling like, wow, this is powerful, and at the same time, her not real depth on the issues either. But before I go too far, Let's back up a little bit. And did you attend public school growing up?
Yeah, in fact, I went to almost every public high school in Boise, Idaho, until I found an alternative high school, and so I ended up graduating from the alternative high school. And I tell you, I had a great time in that alternative high school because they were open, to do things a little bit differently. They see that they have a group of kids that the public school model did not really work for them, and so they're trying to figure out how these kids can be educated. And I really flourished, man. I saw things that were just kind of missing, it's a void of a lot of things that could have helped with the learning with these kids, but also to build a cohesive group and learning environment. And for instance, one of the things that I helped implement at the school that I was at, and it was called Mountain Cove High School, was what was called a peer review process. And so we had a lot of these kids that were getting into fights, and they were already in trouble with the law, and these kids were violent, and it was kind of I don't know, a culture thing. We had some gang bangers and stuff like that there, even in Boise, Idaho. And what I figured out was, a lot of times these people that are in the position of so-called, quote unquote authority are the ones that kind of can make problems escalate. And that if we had a way to diffuse these problems without bringing it to the authorities' attention, then we would, not need to, deal with that problem as well as escalating. So what I did was I encouraged, we had a student body meeting where everybody was together, and I said, look, we're going to have a drop box. If we ever see that there's a problem with that somebody's having a confrontation with another student, I want you to anonymously just put these guys' name in this drop box, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to call them out, and we're going to counsel them and talk to them as students. And I was one of the people that would be there at the meeting, and we're going to figure this out without bringing anybody else into this. And if we couldn't figure it out, then it was time to go to the quote unquote authorities for more help. But what we found out was the instances of violence decreased dramatically, and these people just needed to have a way that they could address their problems and communicate together in a non-threatening, non-intimidating type of environment, and it worked out really well. And that just kind of opened my eyes as like, look at these guys that are supposed to be teaching us really don't have a clue about a lot of these aspects or a lot of these problems that we're facing. And, the solutions are out there. We just need to act and to use our brain and logically figure out situations. And that's just one of the things that I helped at that high school that I'm very proud of, that peer mediation program that we put into effect, that dramatically changed, a lot of people's lives. And I think that we can take this further with neighborhoods and communities, all that kind of stuff. If we really know what's going on and know the people around us, and we're going to have a better understanding of our environment. And with that better understanding, you're going to be able to step more confidently and know the truth instead of buying somebody else's version of the event or being marketed or being sold a lie. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great story. I'm glad you told that and that experience because there's a psychological term, I can't recall it off the top of my head, but like misplaced aggression, or when you have the aggression that the outside influences are causing you to want to become aggressive, but if you don't have an outlet for that, any kind of outlet that could help to diffuse it even, then that it will come out in some way. And so you kind of are like starting a smaller fire there to take on the bigger fire, giving an outlet for it to take away from that aggressive behavior that will ultimately result. And before we go too far, I also better explain why we called you Bow Wow Bill in the beginning. So do you want to just go into that a little bit?
Bow Wow Bill is just the name of the persona that I undertake as far as my dog training profession, and so that is me. I'm Bow Wow Bill, and that's the business that I have here, and yeah. So and just like what you were saying, like. This mediation is exactly that. It's a steam vent that allows the steam to be vented out before the pressure gets too big that we have something catastrophic on our hands.
Nice. So what is meant by the secrecy? Secrecy is the enemy of healing.
Oh man, that's one of my favorite quotes. And that's true. You know, secrecy is the enemy of healing. The guardian of knowledge, the guardian of anything is a big problem in this world. And, you know, that's why I'm so open with the information that I provide. And I tell people, even in the dog training world, you know, I am just a purveyor of information. This animal is our expert. You know, we need to look at them and their responses to see if the information that I just provided is true and is real. And, you know, secrecy is the enemy of healing is, you know, just something that we can take. And it talks also to, you know, counseling and being open with each other and not holding stuff down, you know, even if it's something that might be a little bit ugly, you know, to talk about it, to bring light to it, to shine a light on it. You know, in the secret, in the dark is where, you know, the most evil shit happens, you know, and that's where they want to keep it secret. And if we don't know about it or choose not to know about it, then we're not going to heal from it. So that's what I take from that quote, secrecy is the enemy of healing. I don't know where I heard it originally, so I don't know who to attribute it to or who it is to attribute it to, but I sure do love it, man. And it's something that I will continue to say. I just know it.
Yeah, if there's an attribute, I'll do it in the show notes. But I recently heard it just screening some of your podcasts, and it stuck with me and thought you could elaborate on it. Thank you. Also, this is switching gears, but tell me about your experience, because I know you've had some direct first-hand experience with cannabis oil and the healing effects of cannabis oil and kind of the surprising way you've applied it or seen it applied that most people might not have heard about.
Absolutely, man. That's another. I'm a huge advocate for the medicinal uses of cannabis, and you know, I actually found Rick Simpson. Episode number 73 of the Free Your Mind podcast is where I interviewed Rick Simpson, and I definitely encourage all your listeners to check out that episode that I did. It's one of my favorite ones because I really admire this guy, Rick Simpson, because he was kind of the red pill that I took when I saw this cannabis. You know, this cannabis oil. And how it started, Tyler, was I was up here. My wife has an autoimmune disorder. She has severe rheumatoid arthritis. And we were having a really hard time with it. She was in a lot of pain. And whenever you're in a lot of pain, that really takes, you know, center stage and brings it into the limelight. And we wanted to get her comfortable. But I'm looking at all these pills that she's taken, and it was, you know, over 20 of them. I think she was on like 24 pills, and plus we were on an infusion. We were testing out a lot of these different drugs and stuff like that, and it just seemed like it was starting to snowball into something that was not good. And finally, one day I looked at my wife, and she was gray. Like I was looking at her, and her color was like void of you know, any like red or it just didn't look good. Like she was looking kind of bad, and I finally had a realization. I was like, oh my God, you're dying. This is not good. If we're going to continue down this path, then you're not going to be here that much longer. And you know, when I first married her, I knew that she had you know, autoimmune disorder, so I kind of knew that I was getting into this, and I, you know, took a deep breath and thought, you know what, okay, this is something that we're going to have to do together, and if you're going to die, then I want you to die with dignity. And so we went and we got her a medical marijuana card here in Seattle, and we went and bought some marijuana, just some plain flowers, the buds, And I remember being at the dispensary where we bought this marijuana app, they had this syringe, and I was kind of turned off because it was a syringe, and when you think of syringe, you think of IV drug users or something. And I was like, what the heck is that? And the guy was like, that's Rick Simpson's oil, and I didn't really think anything about it. I just went, huh, and we bought some weed, went home, and we partook. We smoked this weed, and it was fun. We started laughing. We were watching cartoons, and it was like, hey, this is bad. I feel like I'm back in high school, and then all of a sudden my wife started coughing, and she got into kind of a fit that anytime that she really coughs and jars that muscle or jars that body, and then her muscles could be spasming and could cause a flare up with her condition. And so I wanted to, it just kind of stopped everything right away. I was like, what the hell am I doing? This is not good. This is something that might worsen the situation, not make it better. And so I decided to do a little bit more research into that oil that I saw there. And so I remember thinking, okay, Simpsons, like Simpson cartoon. And so I typed in Simpsons oil. And then that's where I found Mr. Simpson's show. It's called Run From the Cure, and you can watch it on YouTube. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out, where he talks about making the essential oil from this cannabis plant and applying it to different spots on his body that had cancer. He had skin cancer that was going to be cut out, and this oil started clearing up the cancer right away. And he had a head injury. He started taking it orally, and he started feeling way better, much better than any of these pharmaceuticals, much more relief than these drugs could provide. And then he started asking doctors and different people, why is this illegal? And he was met with animosity. He was met with, there's no way that this doctor is going to believe you. And the thing is that, he was perplexed because this was the truth. And if we're not asking people to believe it, we're asking people to see it for themselves. But, it's hard when so many people have an idea about something that is completely backwards, 180 degrees in the wrong direction. And I started to really, really, do my research on this oil and started to make it myself and giving it to my wife. And man, we started peeling away these pharmaceuticals. And I mean, today we were just out downtown running around together, and she's looking wonderful, and we have our own garden and everything. And long story short, she's nothing compared to what she was on these pharmaceuticals. And it's just been a really, big learning experience for me. But, when I started to do this, I noticed that as a dog trainer, I would have dogs come to me that I'm looking at their medications, and they're on the same stuff that my wife was on. And so I started doing some research on this cannabis oil, giving it to the dogs, and it affects them a lot differently than us, but it works the same way. And I started giving this oil to dogs with a variety of different ailments, from cancer to epilepsy to neurodegenerative diseases, other stuff that was taken away from their quality of life, but also just end-of-life care for these dogs. And I've saw some pretty dramatic results with these dogs. I had a dog come to me that was 10 and a half years old, and she was diagnosed with cancer, and she was given a year at the most to live. And now, the dog is still here. The dog's 15 now, no more cancer, running around like a mad woman, and she's doing great. And so I've done, various seminars now, and kind of borrowed the arena that I belong to with the dog industry and my colleagues, and showing people, sharing my observations and experience of this, using this wonderful medicine, but also showing people how to make it themselves. And so they know either how to make it themselves or how to recognize proper oil that has been made with good techniques, so they're buying the good stuff, and then just start to educate people as much as possible. Start speaking the truth once you have experience, and especially through direct experience, through gnosis. It's a totally different ballgame than just researching it or reading about it. When you see it with your own eyes, it makes it much more real. And so, but once you see it and once you know the truth, then it's, kind of our obligation to speak it and to use our voice and to educate our fellow humans and to show them, look, at this is, we've been sold a can of lies, and this is the truth, and let me show you the truth, and don't just believe me, let me show it to you. And then and I also, whenever I do these presentations, I tell everybody, do not believe a word I say. Research everything I say. We belong to a world that has experienced a technological revolution. And when I was interviewing Richard Grove from Tragedy and Hope on my podcast, we spoke about the last 6 years and this technology that has been opened up to us. And I mean, I tell you, Tyler, I've learned more in the last 6 years than I have in my whole life. And, Richard said something that I totally agree with. That speaks to the dynamic versatility of the human being and our willingness to learn and to change. And so that's why I do what I do and why I use my voice to speak truth, regardless of who believes me or not. I could care less if somebody believes me or doesn't believe me. In fact, I don't want them to. I want them to take the information that I provide them, use logic, and research it out on their own.
Yeah, and that's a clear message that I want to also keep repeating in this podcast as well, that's not what I'm here doing either, is saying you need to believe this or this information is something that we all need to start believing. It's just doing the due diligence of passing the torch down of information we've already tried to vet ourselves through processes like the Trivium method, and making sure that we're not passing bad information downstream. So we'll do our best to make sure that we're passing good information downstream, but no one, is able to give away the responsibility for doing the research themselves. That's always your responsibility. And like you said, the more and more you do it, actually the more responsibility you have at that point to point out certain things to other people, especially when it comes to saving lives. Because if this information would have been brought to me sooner in my life, I know people personally who are now dead, who definitely probably could have benefited from this information, either through just, like you said, the pain aspect alone, but then the healing aspect. I mean, originally you were just looking to heal your wife with soothing her with the pain. You said, hey, if this is how it's going to be, let's see how we can make you more comfortable. And is she still using the cannabis oil to this point to help with the autoimmune disorder, or?
Yep, absolutely. In fact, I just made some more oil the other day, so we're good to go. And I think that this speaks to that quote that I said earlier about the secrecy is the enemy of healing. If we had this information open to these people that you're speaking about that have gone to heaven or have passed away, that maybe they might be here with us, and so that is that is what I also mean by the enemy of healing. We need to get this out there so people not only can heal themselves, psychically, but also physically as well, and mentally too. So it's walking that walk, and most importantly, using your voice, no matter how shaky and nervous you sound, to use that voice to speak the truth. And to fall back on the greater good, which is, all of us in humanity experiencing our perception, or a pinpoint of perception as we are right now.
Yeah, and you said that was episode 73, the Rick Simpson episode?
Yeah, I believe that's it. I can.
Yeah, we'll link that. Well, no, we'll link it in the show notes. No worries.
Okay.
And yeah, Rick Simpson oil. Definitely look into that, guys. Well, and I think it's. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say Phoenix Tears is Rick Simpson's website, and Rick Simpson. What I love about him is that, even though his name has been attached to this oil, it's also called FECCO Full Extract Cannabis Oil, FEMCO Full Extract Medical Cannabis Oil, Cannabis Oil. Some people call it hemp oil, but that's kind of a mislabeling, because people are selling hemp oil that is not is not medicinal. It's just like olive oil, doesn't have the stuff that you need. Yeah. And he doesn't sell the oil. He basically gives away the information on how to make it yourself, and that's what I want to do too.
Yeah. I had a friend who came into work all excited the other day telling me about a CBD oil he had found in a health food store, and it had like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit amount, like the stuff you're talking about. Like they're just kind of selling it as a hype thing now, but what we're talking about here is completely different than that. It's Rick Simpson oil, and Rick Simpson doesn't sell, produce, label, patent, market. The reason it got labeled Rick Simpson is by chance someone else made that label and he didn't do that. It just stuck, and so don't get caught there either that he's a snake oil salesman or something like that. What Bill said is the best thing to do is make it yourself at home. And we're not talking about getting high here, people. We're talking about healing. We're talking about actually having the power to heal a lot of the things that are most likely going to start occurring in more and more of our lives than they already are. Absolutely. But and this is a medicine that has been taken from us. It has been intentional, a lot of it just unknowing dupes just going along with the mainstream agenda. Not like everyone who's suppressed it is evil, every doctor evil or something like that. But if you look at Rockefeller medicine, if you look at the oil industry coming out of their reign and then getting into education and the medical establishment, you can see why they financially had the want to do it, or they justified it financially. If you don't want to go into the other aspects of it, that it's a eugenics agenda or that it has to do anything with that, you can at least see that there was a financial benefit to suppressing this medicine, because we could be growing this in our own backyard, making our own medicine and curing a cancer that comes up for $500 rather than $500,000.
Absolutely. Well, and you got to look at the juxtaposition of this time that it was made illegal with the prohibition of alcohol, and how they built up this large mechanism of government to police the prohibition of alcohol. And when they made marijuana illegal, they just pointed that monster, led by Harry Anslinger, to police the drug war and to start to repurpose that from alcohol to drug prohibition. And then we have, of course, the polyester rope and the plastics industry. There's so many things, and I recommend people reading the book Emperor Wears No Clothes to kind of give you an idea of how many textiles and functions can be made from this wonderful plant. And and then we look at the medicinal aspect of it, and people, this plant is psychoactive, and you can OD on this plant, especially when you start taking it in concentrated forms. And so it's nothing to really mess around with whenever you start dosing out with this plant. And you literally are taking the essential oils from marijuana buds. And so you want the THC, you want the psychoactive qualities there, and people are really, really gung-ho on the CBD right now, and that stands for cannabidiol, which is, it's a wonderful thing, but, this plant is whole by itself. We don't need to extract one derivative from this plant and take that. We need to take the plant as it comes. It's good to go in its natural packaging. Just maybe condense it down and, dose it out. And the good thing about it is that you eat it. You don't smoke it. You eat it, you ingest it. You can apply it topically as well. But if you look at the 1974 Stanford study that was done regarding THC in cancer tumors, you'll find out that THC, which stands for tetrahydrocannabinol, is what melted these cancer tumors. And THC is the cancer killer. And so to take CBD and think that you're going to get, better, I'm sorry to say that that's not going to work. You need the THC. You need the stuff that is psychoactive, but you also need the stuff that is, we recommend doing an indica dominant strain or pure indica because it has such a sedative quality about it. And so it's going to knock you out, let your body repair itself while we sleep. And so, that's the importance of studying and doing the research on your own, so you don't take the wrong thing, and you know exactly what it is, so when it presents itself, you can choose the right path.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad we gave it a little plug here, and we'll continue to do so. So last we spoke, you were attempting to grow all your own food, and so you didn't have to rely on other sources of that. How's that going?
It's going great, man. We actually just started planting. We just planted 32 varieties of tomatoes. We did some research here because we are in the Pacific Northwest towards the coastal area, so we were having problems with our tomatoes rotting on the vine and not turning red when we needed them to. And so we found some varieties that are Alaskan varieties and Russian varieties that we're going to be trying this year. We're planning out our different crop schedules and locations, and we have just had a meeting with our neighbors, and it's really cool, man. My neighbors, one of them has a tractor that has a rototiller on it, and so we have started sprouting a bunch of seeds for them because we have lights and heating mats, and so they don't, and so we can kind of get a jump start on the program, and so we've started some stuff for them, and then they're coming over, and we've marked out an area that we need rototilled with that tractor. And so they're going to come over and do that tractor, bring it over to our property. And we actually broke down our fence and put up a neighbor gate. And so they can come over whenever they need to without jumping that fence. I didn't want them, hurting themselves or anything. We're all getting older, And first thing that I did when I walk over, anytime I get a new piece of equipment, the first people that I tell about is my neighbors. And I don't say to them, I got a new equipment. I got the new tractor. I don't say that. I say we. Because they're more than welcome to any of this stuff, and I want them to know that. I will take care of whatever I borrow from them, but I want them to borrow stuff from me because this stuff has a task. This chainsaw is meant to saw things down. Well, guess what? Sometimes I'm not using it, but you need it. And so there you go, man. Let it do the job that it's meant to do. And so I really like the concept presented in the movie The Zeitgeist about the resource-based economy. And so we're trying to put that into practice here, and we are putting it into practice here, and it really, really helps out. It helps to, break down the fences between neighbors in the community, allows them to do more with less because now we can borrow from each other, and it's a really cool thing, man. But you have to get out there, you have to shake hands, you have to meet your neighbors, and I encourage everybody who's listening here to, if you don't know your neighbors, put out, make a little bread or some banana bread, zucchini bread, whatever, and go out and meet them and give them a little gift and say howdy. And even if they're shitheads, then at least they're your neighbors, and now you've all chosen to live in that particular area, and so you all have something in common.
Yeah, that's awesome. And here in my local area, we're doing stuff with like freedom cells, trying to reach out to like a little bit more of the broader community and network with these little cells that work together towards like all this stuff, creating markets, creating trade, creating open communication and safety and emergency awareness and all this between neighbors who are just doing this under their own free will, no outside influence at all. It's a decentralized way of handling our own problems. And I think the cannabis oil and agorism kind of has a link there, and I'll just kind of drop that hint. And nextdoor.com and freedomcells.org, I would check those two sites out to find people in the local area that want to trade. I mean, nextdoor.com is like, hey, I have this. Who wants to trade? And we're going to switch gears again and go into a couple things here, and I'm going to say a quote, and then I'm going to highlight something that will link it in and that I want you to kind of elaborate on. The quote, I know you'll like it, another one of your quotes. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And that was Viktor Frankl.
Yep, Viktor Frankl from...
and I also tie that in with, what you understand about the Milgram experiment as well, though,
Right, so, and let me see if I could find... it goes a little bit further. This quote does. I wonder if I can find the full quote here. So, Viktor Frankl, I definitely recommend people checking this guy out, man. He was in the Holocaust. He was in these camps, and he talks about his experiences during that time. And he talks about how no matter what is happening to you, that it is your choice to decide how you respond to that. And in a world that is full of reactivity, that once the stimulus is presented, people are already reacting to it hardly before the sentence is even stated, that it becomes automatic, and that's where we start getting into this conditioned responses. With Pavlov, we had the dogs. And anytime that he would ring a bell, then these dogs would start to salivate to start getting ready for this food that they're about ready to get, and that is a reaction based on a stimulus from their environment. And if we had, an opportunity to stop and to really, really look at a situation, that's what's important. It's not just to respond or react to it, but to actually choose a response that could better the situation, or to help free people that might not be aware of the prison that they're in. And there's a longer quote here. I'm trying to type and talk at the same time.
Nowhere is frustration aggression more apparent than in modern-day military training. In her study of Japanese atrocities in China, Iris Chang observed that Japanese troops were subjected to particularly severe abuse prior to their deployment. They were repeatedly slapped for no reason, humiliated in front of their peers, and reduced to a state of impotent rage. It was generally at this point that they would be given a bayonet and instructed to attack the enemy, who was portrayed as a subhuman animal. In America, the same techniques would be adopted, with the emphasis less on physical abuse than verbal.
You respond with aye, aye, sir, do you understand? Yes, sir! Get off my bus right now! Yes, sir! Hurry up! I don't want to let's go! Hurry up!
They're scared. That's pretty much what it boils down to. You have a recruit that has no idea what the Marine Corps is about.
Hurry up!
It's that initial shock treatment to let them know that this isn't a summer camp, this isn't where people are coming to have a good time, that we got a real job down here, and that's making United States Marines.
My family was poor. I mean, we used to live on dirt roads, and we used to wear sandals most of the time, or we're humble. We used to probably wash our same clothes 2 or 3 times a week, because that's basically pretty much what we had. I wanted people to see that, this is where I come from, and look at me now, I'm a Marine. I come from the poor side of town, so anybody else could make it as well. Some type of motivation for my little brothers and my little cousins, something they could look forward to.
Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire! Hey, Roger. Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
Bushmaster 2-6, Bushmaster 2-6.
Damage, Kyle. All right, hit him by heck. All right, you're clear. All right, I'm just trying to find targets again.
Frustration aggression is one of the most effective ways of managing a population. By directing a person's rage against selected minorities or outside enemies, the true cause of an individual's frustration can be effectively diverted. Yet in many ways, the theory is a symptom of something deeper. In order to engender real hatred against a particular group, that group must first be feared. And it is in the realm of fear that behaviorism made its most disturbing contribution.
Hobart Maurer, he would be called a neo-behaviorist, and he trained at the Yale Institute of Human Behavior. And he was quite unusual. I think his background was unusual, and he was also an unusually perceptive and sensitive man. And one of the first and most significant experiments he did was called a preparatory set, in which he had a human being lie down, or usually it was a student, lie down and be attached to electrodes that would deliver a shock whenever a light went on. And then so he would shine the light and then shock the student. And at that point several people elected to discontinue the experiment. But those who persisted, he would then vary the experiment by showing the light and then not shocking them, or showing the light and shocking them. He would sort of make it unpredictable. And he discovered that people's state of anxiety and fear actually increased when the shock didn't come, when they were just waiting for a shock to come, or when they didn't know if a shock would ever come. And he said it actually created an atmosphere of pervasive fear and anxiety, and he even called it dread or terror.
We have to remind ourselves that we are facing an enemy that is planning all over this world, and it turns out planning inside our country to come here and kill us.
And he said that atmosphere could be ratcheted up progressively the more the experiment continued and the more unpredictable the shocks were, so that after a while, when the shock came, the pain actually was experienced as relief and almost pleasure by the subject. He called it a nervous breakdown, or what he described in another part of the article as the ultimate demoralization of behavior. What he extracted from this experiment was the idea that there was such a thing as a coercive stimulus that could actually be used to create an environment of dread or terror or anxiety from a low to a high level, and that the scientists could actually, it was almost as if they were turning the volume on a stereo. They could decide how much of that atmosphere, how intense they would like it to be.
Needless to say, a creature in a highly fearful environment will be eager to escape to a new environment. This includes human beings. Maurer suggested that new behavior patterns could be quickly created through his techniques. The prospect of creating new behavior patterns quickly and efficiently became an obsession during the Cold War, when the Central Intelligence Agency assumed dominance in the field of mind control experimentation. During the Cold War, the national security state would take the logic of power to its logical conclusion. Known under the umbrella name MK-Ultra, mind control experimentation by the CIA would abandon any pretense to morality, leading to a nightmarish search for the holy grail of social engineering, a fully controlled, fully obedient human being.
So Viktor Frankl says, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And then that leads into his quote of, everything, or between stimulus and response there lies a gap, and in that gap lies our choice, and in our choice lies our freedom. And, that's where, with the Milgram experiment you were talking about earlier, and the Milgram experiment, to anybody who is not familiar, is the experiment where it's a sociology experiment where these guys were paid to go into a lab. They took volunteers, and then they would have this guy that was dressed in a white lab coat, look very formal and professional, and he would tell these people what exactly they needed to do. And basically they sat in front of this machine, and the machine had all these levers and buttons on it, and it basically, they went over to the other room, and they saw that there was another person there with electrodes on, and any time that they had to read from this questionnaire, and any time that this person in that room with the electrodes on got a question that they asked wrong, he would receive a shock, and then the next question would be a higher shock. And this the dial that adjusted the shocks was labeled, where this person would receive a fatal shock. And so they wanted to see if anybody would take and shock somebody fatally, as long as there was somebody telling them what to do. And what they found out was that 65% of people would go all the way, would literally kill somebody else because somebody of quote unquote authority, what we're talking about earlier, told them that it was for a good reason. And it's also, there's a great show on Netflix, I don't know if it's still there, but it was called The Experimenter, and they go into depth on this, and I definitely recommend people checking out that show. And during this, there was one person out of so many that would just stop and say, "Hey, look I'm not doing this anymore. And even though I don't care who's telling me I need to do it, I made the free choice to come in here and to take part in this experiment. I'm taking my free will and making the choice to get the heck out of here and saying, no, I'm not going to participate anymore." And another aspect of the Milgram experiment was that they had, once they started getting a large pool of information, then they started to say, what would happen if somebody saw another person saying no to this? And they basically, so they would have somebody watching the experiment from another room, and then they would see that somebody stood up and said no. And the numbers skewed dramatically where these people felt empowered that they would say no. And so the people that would go all the way went down to about 30%. And so it's very important for somebody to see somebody else being courageous, because that will empower them to be courageous as well. And bringing it back to Viktor Frankl, that's one of our true freedoms, and that's why they call it free will, right? Because we're not automatons. We're all individuals. And even though it might get uncomfortable to say no, that is the most powerful word in the English language, because now we have taken back our power from those that would say that they own us, or they are controlling us, or they are our masters, that we say no, and we're not going to participate in this program that is torturing another person or killing another person, that we are going to stop, think for ourselves, not just react to somebody of authority telling us what to do, that we are going to take responsibility, our ability to respond, and to make the right choice, which is not to hurt another person.
Yeah, and that's the difference between who you mentioned, Ivan Pavlov, and the others behaviorists around that time, B.F. Skinner, John B. Watson, were all realizing about animals, and took that and extrapolated it onto the social environments that we're now living in. And the stimulus response mechanism is true for a human being, and that has to be taken into account, that we are programmable in this way, and we can be exposed to things like operant conditioning that they were using on these animals and rats and babies and children, and these guys almost kind of had a sick interest in understanding that mechanism in animals, and then extrapolating on how that could be used to control human beings, and then comparing us in this way. And unfortunately, they've been very successful at creating a stimulus response environment through the media, through the indoctrination that we go through, the 15,000 hours of public school. The aspect of critical thinking is basically taken out of the individual's upbringing, so they don't understand how to even critically think for themselves, and you end up becoming a servant to other forces that you don't even understand, because there's a stimulus there that's making you do things, And they get you to believe that it's actually even good what you're doing, which leads me to another quote, and I don't know who to attribute this to either, but we'll do it in the show notes if there is one. But that would be, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, they and that's what they want. They want people to think that they're doing good and they're serving a greater good by giving up their individualistic traits, right? And all this is social engineering. You know, these guys are well funded, and it's very important to, you know, anybody that has a lot of money to trace back that money. Who's funding these people? And what we're going to find out is that, you know, a lot of the global elite that have vested interest in a docile population are the ones that are pumping money into these programs to find out how they can manipulate a large number of people. And they know that people are good, and they know that things get uncomfortable, and to say no and to stand up is not, you know, the most comfortable thing to do. And then they're like, well, let's use, you know, other people to help us police the situation, and that's how they get it. Is they don't need somebody on every block. When you have your friends and family that have bought this program that they are trying to sell, they bought it hook, line, and sinker, and now they're trying to be enforcers to keep you in line as well. And it's, I mean, just like Mark, what's Mark's last name that does Devlin? Mark Devlin from the UK, who talks about music and the entertainment industry, how when we were discussing it, we kind of begrudgingly have to tip our hats off to these guys because they really have, you know, thought this stuff through and seen it work. It's just evil shit, because they are taking that free will choice away from you, and people are readily giving it away. It's just they want to take to see how far they can get these people to go. And I definitely recommend people checking out a book called Walden 2, written by B.F. Skinner, and where they talk about Walden is actually a compound where they have these people that are living in a social engineered environment, the ideal environment. And it's pretty eye-opening when you start to see how young they want these kids, and how deeply ingrained with the conditioning they have for these people. And I mean, even the global elite, they refer to us as useless eaters, as the profane, the walking dead. And so they look at us like animals. You know, they call us the vulgar masses. And, you know, they think, even with this social engineering, I think that they think that they are doing good. They think that they're kind of watching over us, you know. But it's something that it needs to be thoroughly investigated, and when you start to see, you know, the mechanisms of control that are present, that it's kind of mind-blowing, you know, because but it's also a double-edged sword too, because once you're awake to it, then you start to want to waken up others to it, and you see how deep the indoctrination goes, and that's where it gets heartbreaking, because the people that you love, you find out a lot of times that they love their slavery, and that to me is very sad, because we're here to experience and to grow, and, you know, not to be you know, the whipping boy of some global elite higher class. We are here to experience, live life, and create. We are all creators here.
Yeah, so what do you think about fear is the mind killer?
Yeah, absolutely,
in regards
man.
to that.
Fear is the mind killer. You know, when we're afraid, it shuts off parts of our mind that are not going to allow us to really, really grasp a situation for the true nature that it is. And some of these situations really take some depth and really take a lot of contemplation. And in order to do that, we need all access to our brain, including to the outer buffer layer called the neocortex, or the prefrontal cortex, that allows us so many more capabilities with our thought process that these animals do not have. And that's the whole in the program too, is that, when we are in fear, we are basically using our mammalian brain, our limbic system. And that's where we are susceptible to this type of conditioning, is by just speaking to that limbic system. And that's the animals that have been the result of all of this philosophy that they use with behavior control. That's all that they have. That's the only part of the brain that they go to, is to that limbic system. And so when you shut off that other aspect, that prefrontal cortex, we're basically dealing with an animal that is in the same thought process as of a lower consciousness being. And that's what they want, is to have people in fear. And not only that, but you're more likely in fear to react than you are to reason through a situation. Reasoning takes that contemplation, takes that left and right brain modality and merges them together. And so we're not just reacting, we're not just emotionally responding to something, we're using logic to piece it together so we can make the right choice based on the information and that which is.
Absolutely. Like you said, I think that quote sums it up great. Fear is the mind killer, because if they can keep you in that base consciousness, or even you just keep yourself there through not wanting to look into new information, not wanting to open up, so you kind of keep yourself in a little bubble, it becomes the mind killer, and you become suspect, or you become victim to this stimulus response much more easy for them to implement that on you if you're in this fear modality. And we talk about the 3 tiers, like you said, mammalian, a reptile, mammalian, and then our human brain, with logic and reason happening there mostly. And so if we're not using the higher aspects of our consciousness, and we're just operating in the reptile brain, which is there for a reason, and we should use it, and it's there for a good reason, but that can't control us, that can't rule over us to the point where we're not even able to take that time to create the space to think a little while. And I play around with this a lot, because there's lots of times where I need to react to something, or I feel like I need to react to something, so I intentionally create that space. And it's amazing what happens when you start practicing that. And you can just do it on a daily basis, even with little things that feel like you really need to react to it, and just create some space just as a practice, just to try it out. And it's amazing what just trying it out does, even, for me anyway.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. And the thing is that when I tell people that we're working with the animal, with a dog, the number one mistake that people make when they are working with a dog is by anthropomorphizing the dog, or putting human characteristics on this dog. And I have to remind them that we as human beings have this capability with our thought processes, that to put this on the dog is actually a disservice to this animal, because they're not even capable of that. And so we instead have to become the dog by proxy, instead of labeling our own characteristics on this animal. And that's where we start. And I get it. It's very easily to understand something when we can see it through our own perception. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the social engineers know that the brain doesn't know the difference between stimulus that is real and stimulus that has been simulated, right? And so I recommend people, there's a couple books that I recommend, Inward Tennis and Inward Skiing, where they take fMRIs, functioning MRIs, and they're scanning the brains of these people that are athletes. And they also did it with the bobsled team, where they actually took this MRI and they put it on the bobsled team, and they had them do their run with these portable MRIs so they can map their brain during the run, right? And so then they came back into the science lab, and they said, okay, now I want you to sit in this chair. I want you to close your eyes and visualize the run with your mind's eye, so to speak. And what they found out, Tyler, is that the exact same parts of that brain lit up as they were visualizing this run than if they were doing it for real. And what this taught the scientists is that the brain does not know the difference between simulated or real. And so a lot of these engineered, fear-provoking stimulus in our environment is simulated. It's like money, right? And being short on money for rent or paying your bills. Imagine how much fear that evokes, and that's just an abstract concept that requires our belief to be real. And that's a huge aspect of this social engineering, is to make things that are fear evoking, and will keep people from accessing all parts of that brain, because they want them in fear. They want them to be worried and wary about speaking out, venturing out, or becoming their own person.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely like how it's done, really. When you get down to it, that's the main aspect. I'd like to bring up a book here, Bill. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not, but it's Mass Control, Engineering Human Consciousness by Jim Keith.
Yes, I've heard of it. I have not read it. In fact, I need to write that down, by Jim Keith here. I know I have that in my Amazon.
Well, it goes a lot into what you were just talking about, which is just kind of like the social conditioning level of this whole fear mechanism, or just the kind of the constraints that are put on people now in a much more mental way than it used to be into organized society. It used to be much more direct, even to the point of kind of direct chains and whips and shackles slavery, to now it's more of a free range thing that I like to call it, like we're like open range, free range cattle. We're allowed to graze on the grass, but we're still, right now we're even talking about building a wall around our country, around this country, sorry, not our country, around this country, building a wall to keep us in, and kind of even bringing in more of this Orwellian state, animal farm type situation,
Absolutely. We're allowed to eat the grass, but when we go back to the stables, what are they spraying that grass with? It's something that there are always unforeseen mechanisms of influence, and just the belief that we are free is exactly what they want. And so just like all of this, these conveniences that we have, I have this little box in my pocket that gives me all these answers. It allows me so much access to all my friends, and the social networks of Facebook, the Reddit, the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Snapchats. All that stuff is fun and cool, and it also gives me a feeling that I'm free to do whatever I want. But what happens when you start seeing your posts being taken down, or start being banned from a particular site because somebody reported? It's just an illusion. You're not really free. You are on somebody else's platform. You are on somebody else's land. And as long as you behave and act like a good little slave, then you are going to be okay. But once you start, making waves, then you start to get noticed. And that's where, you are starting to be pushed away. And it is about control. It's about this, panopticon, this point of leverage that these people that hold the positions of power, the powers that should not be, have. And it's just as long as we are buying what they're selling, then we're good to go. They'll continue to produce it, and it also goes in the entertainment with football and with sports, and college sports. And it's just crazy to me that these houses of supposed to be education, the most of their budgets are for these child's games. And I see the value of it. I see that it is just like we were talking about how it's a steam vent, and how I was talking about the peer mediation program that I put in that high school, how it was a steam vent that didn't allow this to build up to a situation that we had, a volatile situation on our hands. That this is the tribal steam vent for that's what football is. It allows people to get their Their kicks off voting for a team and associate something that, could, if it wasn't there, possibly mean warfare, these tribal sects that they get into. So I do see some value to it. It's just not good when people put so much emphasis and put so much of their energy into this situation or into these models of distraction. And I hear a quote that if people just took, about 10 or 20% of the passion that they have for their local football team and applied that to their community, that would change the world almost overnight. When we look around at who we can serve and volunteer, go help some people that might be underserved or, getting old and not be able to do things like they used to, that this could help them and help us along the way as well. But as long as we are distracted and have all these conveniences, we need to realize that these conveniences can also be used to further enslave you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And how they can distract you from also doing creative work. And I think you're someone who, I've kind of followed your work for a while, and I see that you spend a lot of the free time that you have not watching college football. Maybe you're into it, maybe you're not, but more or less getting your hands right there into the dirt, really, literally, and among many other things. And you're kind of like what we all should strive to be at this time with all this technological power, kind of like Renaissance people, Renaissance men, with many aspects to ourselves that we're developing, and not putting that energy into the mind control, into the distraction, into the bread and circuses, into the politics, into the fear-mongering, and the overall, just like you were trying to explain earlier, and you did a good job, which is like a full spectrum dominance coming your way. And so why give that any more attention than you have to, and put it into doing things that are, if you want to create a better society, the actions that need to be done to do that are, like you said, little acts of kindness and community, and building networks of people that are like-minded. These are all things that sound simple enough, and it is hard work to get into that. But then that becomes a feather bed, that you fall into. It's not that you have to go protest and march Capitol Hill and in the Federal Reserve and all these things. It's what you just said. It's those things, and it's a lot of the examples that you've shown us, the things that you've done in your own life. And one of those things more recently, and you guys should go check out Bill's Facebook videos of him just making these glass sculptures. Bill, tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And know that this is real. When you're out talking to your neighbors, when you're out meeting people in your community, that's real. That's not simulated. You're not spinning your tires in a simulated environment, getting all wrapped up with politics or with, this football team that you have no clue who these people are, but you can ramble off every stat about where they're from, all their tackles and touchdowns and all this stuff, and these people and know more about them than you do about your own community. And to me, that just is perplexing the hell out of me, because this is real. You walk down the street and boom, there's that person standing right there in front of you. Get to know them. Don't get to know the persona that is being projected for you. Get to know somebody for real, and get out, reach, and we also have to realize that we come from a creator. And in doing so, we are mini creators, right? And so we're here to create, and we're here to do art, and we're here to be vulnerable, and we're here to experiment. And that's what I have chosen to do. The glass thing I've been doing since May. So I just started it in May. I dabbled on it a little while ago. I have a lot of friends that really, they do it for a living. They blow glass. And the catalyst that made me start and build my own studio and start to learn on my own was one of my friends. Actually, he passed away. He surprisingly committed suicide. And I had no clue. I was talking to him earlier that week, and even now it has a dramatic effect on me. I mean, I'm still, and I don't think I ever will be, quote unquote, over it, but it's made me realize, a couple things. One, that life is very short, and two, we just don't know the battle that our fellow humans are going through. And, that helps us realize that when you reach out to your network and you talk to them and get to know them. And then I wanted to take my broken heart and transmute it into something beautiful. And so I chose to make art. This gentleman that his name is Maya, and he was one of my best friends. I love him, and I always will. And I can't wait till I'm on the other side when I die and be able to be reunited with him again. And I have a huge poster in my art studio where he watches over me, and I can feel his presence sometimes, and I'm very thankful for that. But, and that also goes on to that quote that we were talking about earlier about Viktor Frankl. It's not what happens to you. We can be upset, and we can be depressed and get on all these antidepressants, anti-anxiety, or psychotropic drugs that are out there. There's lots of things that are out there that are going to make you shut this off, but that's not the point. You're meant to feel it, and you're meant to go through it. And it's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it is your true freedom. And so I have chosen to create art with my broken heart. And that's what I do every single day. If you dedicate 1 hour a day to a task, at the end of 1 year, you have just worked 9 40-hour weeks on that task. And so you've worked over 2 full-time months just on that task, dedicated just by working 1 hour a day. And so you start to see how when you chunk it down, how it's easier. And then you start to learn, and you see that the medium, whatever medium you're working with, whether it be glass, whether it be music, if you're creating music, if you are drawing, if you're painting, you're going to learn different techniques based on your mistakes and being vulnerable. And you're not going to like what you produce at the beginning, or you might have something that is, you might be very talented at it, but even if you do like it, you still strive to make it better. And that's what I do every single day, is to push myself on that torch, to do things, first off, I wanted to do things that I thought were really cool, like vortex marbles and dot stack marbles and stuff like that. But now that you get them, then you just start to do it better, and you start to do it over and over and over again. One of my other favorite quotes is, repetition is the mother of all learning. And that's the case, is whenever you're dealing with behavior, or whenever you're dealing with learning something on your own, you want to do it over and over and over and over again, and that wires your brain. Those neural connections in your brain become 8-lane superhighways until you can really, really start to, do this almost in your sleep, and you develop muscle memory. And, so that's what got me started with that medium. I also like to, I like to play, I have a Native American flute. I like the sound of it, so I went and bought a bunch of them and taught myself how to play that, and I love to play that. I look at working with my dogs as an art, and so there's science based behind it, but there's also an art aspect to it as well. And even working with these dogs, they've taught me a lot of the holes in the programs that these behaviorists put forth. Like Skinner, B.F. Skinner, his program was done in an acoustic chamber called the Science Lab. And when we start to delve out into the world that is rich with external stimuli, then his philosophy kind of goes out the window. And that's what I was seeing, is that I was doing all these clickers and stuff with the dogs, but once we, it would work fine in the house, in the living room, or on our own property or something where the dog was completely comfortable. But once we started venturing out into the world, the dog, it was like all this training, quote unquote training, went out the window because the stimulus was greater than the motivation. And so, that made me ask, why? Why is this happening? Why isn't this dog responding the way that he is supposed to be responding, according to Skinner? And you start to, learn based on experience. You start to learn by doing, and knowledge through that experience is the true and the best way to learn, in my opinion.
Wow, that was absolutely beautiful. I mean, from where you started there and where you left off, I don't even think I could really contribute to it. I will say, though, that I've seen like YouTube videos and whatnot of a dog in an environment where, like a kennel or a city kennel, where they get picked up or they're there as a stray pickup or whatever. And in that environment, the dog is, mean, aggressive, abnormally aggressive, towards everyone around them. And then even just, I don't remember the exact amount of time that goes by when they get a certain person takes them out of that environment and shows them love, compassion, care, warmth, a nice meal, and all these things. And the dog is like completely not even the same whatsoever. It's completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced that as well. But it's also, it's a balance too. That dog needs to know also the structure and the routine and the boundaries that are in place there too. So if we have a dog that comes home and the dog has free rein and runs out into the garage and smells this really good smelling stuff called antifreeze and decides to drink some of it, then we're going to have a bad problem in our hands. So we have to show the dog that we're bringing into the human world, what we expect, but also, to reinforce the good behavior and to correct this bad stuff. And that's where, it's important to watch that dog. But yeah, absolutely, man. People don't realize that the people that originally designed a lot of these dog pounds, the dog shelters in municipalities are the same people that design the jails and the garbage dumps. They'd come through, they'd be like, okay, let's design jails, garbage dump, and then the pound. And so they would borrow a lot of the same design aspects from that. And so absolutely it would invoke a fear response. And just like with human beings, when that animal's afraid, they're going to be acting a totally different we're going to see a totally different set of behavior than if the dog is much more comfortable in an environment. The dog is much more open and willing to venture out of their shell to kind of experiment a little bit to see what this place is all about. And that's not going to happen when they are scared out of their mind. And not only that, but now they're surrounded by a bunch of dogs that are scared out of their mind to reinforce this fear.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's good stuff, and it ties in. I think the dog training has given you a certain glimpse into that world that other people don't get to see. And I've worked with dogs, my own dogs, but obviously not to the degree you have whatsoever. And yeah, I didn't mean to leave out that obviously there's some dogs that they're going to be in that condition and be affected permanently, and it's not like you can just fix them by taking them out of that situation. So, some dogs, I mean, I wouldn't want to speak over what you're saying as the expert on the subject, but, obviously it's not a blanket statement that you just give them love, compassion, and care and they're going to come out of it, as we see with human beings as well. There's the ones we can find that are willing to discuss and open-minded and can see it in your eyes that you're coming from that angle as well. And then there's others that's a threat, and that's something that they're going to shut down and react negatively to. So human beings and dogs are like each other in that way, but not the same, and that's a big difference. We have to point out. But Bill, you're well read, well studied, and speak about your philosophy and your life quite well. Can you list some books, and I hate to put you on the spot like this, but some books that you think would tie into this discussion? Not necessarily your favorites, unless they are, but some books that you have read, just a couple that ties in or that have changed your life significantly that you feel like were big impactors for you.
Absolutely. So we have, of course, Carol Quigley. Let me see. I probably have, yep. Let you look at that there. Right up here, I have a big bookshelf here.
Tragedy and Hope.
Yeah. So I got a big old copy of The Tragedy and Hope here. So if you haven't read that, I definitely recommend reading that. Man's Search for Meaning. That's Viktor Frankl, and that talks about his experiences in the concentration camp. Okay. Definitely, we have The Creature of Jekyll Island. I like that one. It talks about the Warburgs and the setting up of the Federal Reserve. A lot of this, I'm just looking around at my bookshelves here, you know, because I have them all right here, you know. So then we have Emperor Wears No Clothes, which I have right here as well, which I spoke about earlier. Right here, Emperor Wears No Clothes. And the cool thing about The Emperor Wears No Clothes is that if you look at my bookmark in here, here's one of my bookmarks.
Nice.
Yeah, an old big.
So that's not the childhood story then. That's an actual.
Yeah, this is by Jack Herrera, and Jack Herrera is actually the guy that labeled the cannabis oil Rick Simpson oil. He was a buddy of Rick Simpson, and Jack has passed away. But yeah, it's and this one is they have on the back here. It says $100,000 challenge to the world to prove us wrong. And this thing was originally published in, oh yeah, here we go. I got a signed copy from Mr. Herrera right there, so love that. And that was back in 2002, when I got that signed from him. I believe this thing was copyrighted in, 1998, it looks like. So it's, nope. First printing was in 1985. This book has been around since 85. So, Emperor Wears No Clothes.
Yeah, I've heard of that now that I think about it. Actually, from the Peace Revolution, I believe.
Yes.
And Jan Irvin, I believe, has used to promote Jack Hare's work or is associated with him in some way.
Yeah, he worked with him, actually. We talked about that. I just had Jan on the podcast there. We have John Taylor Gatto, who is an amazing man. Here's a book by him. This one is called Dumbing Us Down, and I recommend anything by...
Yeah.
There we go, Weapons of Mass Destruction. Yep. So we got John Taylor Gatto. I mean, there's so many books, man, that we can go through. I'm just kind of touching on the surface here of essential reading. Weapons of Mass Instruction by John Taylor Gatto. God bless John. And then, what was the one that Mark mentioned on? None Dare Call It Conspiracy. That's a good one. That one's a pretty quick read. I definitely recommend checking out the Quadrivium, which is a wooden books. You can get that on Amazon, and that talks about the ancient. Art of Numbers, and we also have the Trivium. Yep, there you go. Yep. And the Trivium is wonderful, and actually Wooden Books just came out with the Trivium as well, so I definitely recommend that. Oh geez, what else do I always find?
Here's one.
Yeah, what do you got? Because I want to.
No. I was going to say one that you read on your podcast that I think would be good to bring up.
Yeah, Jeremy Locke, man. Go ahead.
No, you talk about it, yeah.
So End of All Evil is definitely something worth reading. And I'll check on Amazon right here because I'm always checking. I want to get a hard copy of this book, and I'm thinking about just making some from the PDF. But Jeremy Locke, yeah, I think that...
PDF you can find, yeah.
Yeah, PDF is all over online. And not only that, but in the Free Your Mind podcast, Doug and we actually read the whole book on that on various podcasts, and we have one paperback book for $1,000. We have 3 available on Amazon. One is for $1,000. We have one for $1,249, and then we have one for almost $11,000 here. So it's definitely a great book, man, and I like the simplicity of it. It's a short book, but it talks about what freedom is. Freedom is the infinite value of the human being, and evil is anything that goes against that, and it starts to change the way that you look at the world around us. So Definitely recommend that one. Thank you for that, for suggesting that one. What else? Oh, geez, I don't even have my books that are in my other room. I got 1, 2, 3. I read a lot, man.
No worries. I mean, I know you do, and that's a good start. Really, the idea is to take in a whole holistic approach to your gathering of information, as in the Trivium method. The grammar phase means you take in all the available facts. Well, guess what? We live in a world with infinite amount of information that you'll never be able to get through in this lifetime. So if you're trying to learn, the truth of a matter, or at least get as close to that as you can, we do need to spend a lot of time taking in all the available facts from all the great researchers who have spent all their time passing along the knowledge that they've been able to document. And it is documented. A lot of the time people go down the rabbit hole a little bit with the stuff we've been talking about and start, what's going on? What are we going to do? Oh, no. But really, I mean, the good news is that there's people out there who understand this stuff a lot better than you do, to the point that you're at, and they've written it down and documented it, and there are solutions and good people out there to reach out to. And I think, Bill, that you're one of those people that's doing that great work, and along with the great work, and I don't need you to go on a long definition on that, but we've been kind of wrapping these podcasts up with your message that you want to archive here, because a lot of the time, we're going to make an audio version of this and a video version and try to keep it up on YouTube as long as we don't get taken down. That we live in a world now where you start to do any kind of information putting out, and suddenly you could get just all your videos taken down one day for no reason whatsoever. But these videos and archives of audio that will be produced here will be ongoing on the internet as long as I'm able to keep the hosting services running and the bills paid. So what's your message to people like you and I, who are on a journey at a different level than we are, on a path somewhere along the way, who may come along these breadcrumbs and pick them up, and what can you give to people in the future as an idea for how to kind of deal with that anxiety they may be feeling from an overwhelming amount of information coming at them all at once?
Well, that's a great question, and it's pretty heavy. I mean, and that's the thing, is that the powers that should not be don't want you looking at this stuff. They want you to be intimidated by it. They want you to be have a panic attack and say, it's much bigger than me. I can't do anything about it. Go back to sleep. I'm going to go, just do stuff that I like. Keep digging and keep it up, and get yourself involved with the network of people that actually care and really, really care about truth and knowledge, and don't really have an agenda, and don't want to be a guru. I don't want to be anybody's guru. I love my wife, and I love hanging out with my dogs, and I love living life, but I also love humanity, and I want to see other people loving their lives, and it's so easy to get caught up in these simulated arenas, like I was talking about earlier with the social media or football or anything like that, where you think that you're doing a lot, but you're really spinning your tires in causality. So, educate yourself and listen to your intuition, and but try to stay calm and be kind. And just like we had a gentleman, Robert Stanley, on the program, who has the three things that you need to do to fart.
Nice.
Right, to fight the archon influence of this earth. And
or fart.
Yeah, fart might work too, but be kind, be calm, and be creative. Those are the three things that whenever you're starting to feel overwhelmed, starting to get into this reactive modality, to take a step back and to observe, and to take sorry, I got a phone thing here.
And to take a phone?
No, yeah, it's my grandpa calling me. Love you, Grandpa. But and to keep it up. Even if everybody around you thinks that you're a nut job, that's the good thing about belonging to a network of people that get it, that you have a community that you can fall back on, and that's why I started the Free Your Mind podcast, is because I love the community that I met when I went to the Free Your Mind conference, that I wanted to keep this energy alive. And so I wanted to start to speak about it and to introduce the world to various people as well, just so we can, hold on one second here. Just so we can, reach out even further and start to increase this network. Our network is our net worth. And we have to realize that, tap into it. But also realize that it's an ebb and flow situation. You're going to need time to process. You're going to need time to contemplate. You're going to need space that you can allow this information to really, really get itself pieced together. And that's what's good about having an eclectic knowledge base, is you're going to see some of it's going to be a breadcrumb trail to one place, and then you're going to be turned on to another totally different set of authors or reading or any of that stuff that might change your life pretty significantly. The new information, once it's presented, then it's up to us, if we're going to act on that. And there's so many teachers out there. And we all have something to teach each other, and we all have something to learn from each other. And so that's the other aspect of it, is to be open, and don't just be decided. To be, to sit there and know, I know, everything that I can't know anymore. Then you're dead in the water. You're. My grandpa's not giving up. You're dead in the water. You're waiting. You become kind of vulnerable, and but not in the good way. You want to continue to learn and continue to evolve as you do access and process this new information. And a couple other books too that I'm looking up here that I definitely recommend are Primary Perception by Baxter, and then also anybody on the behavioral front that wants to know anything with Skinner that might raise some doubts with the actual trueness of the philosophy that he presents. Biological Boundaries of Learning is definitely another good one. That one is a hard one to come across as well. It's a very expensive one on Amazon. I think it's around $1,200 right now, but I hope that answered your question. Does that?
Yeah, that was excellent, and I'm going to have to spend some time on ABE books after this interview, I think. And during the editing process while I'm listening to this, I'm going to go through and probably source some of these books and get them in my collection.
Well, and know that this technology too, like I love audiobooks too. Like I can read them, but I also can listen to them as well. And so if I'm working with a dog or out on a dog walk or something like that, I like to listen to an audiobook. And there are some apps out there. One is called Voice Dream, and I have an iPhone, so it's on the iOS, but I think that the Android system might have one as well. And this application will read out loud PDFs to you. And so if you can find a PDF version, like that End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke, if you find a PDF version, you plug it into this app and it will read it out loud to you. And also check YouTube. There's, like I said, there's lots of great teachers out there. But the key is to find them, to learn from them. If you're going to be friends, and be friends and stay in touch, but don't get caught up with one particular person. Advance and move on and learn as much as you can.
Great, Bill. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. And I really appreciate the time you've spent here. A couple technical glitches along the way. But, you've been more than patient and I appreciate your time, especially with all the stuff that you've got going on, and good luck with your growing season this year and your dog training. And tell us, we had mentioned some sites in the beginning where people can reach you, but just remind where people could reach you if they wanted to, or even come and support your work by sharing it or donating, or how they could do that.
Yeah, freeyourmindpodcast.com is probably the best way. I mean, we also have a Facebook page of the Free Your Mind podcast. There's a couple Free Your Mind podcasts. The one with All CNI with the great work, Truth, Love, and Freedom, is the one that you want to follow. You can message me on there. freeyourmindpodcast@gmail.com is a way to get a hold of me. You could also find me through my dog training site, Bow Wow Bill. I have a Facebook fan page, that as well. bowwowbill@gmail.com is another way to get a hold of me. And, it's a real honor to be here with you, and I appreciate your patience as well. I got stuck in traffic and had to push back our start time quite a bit, so I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I encourage you to keep this up and to, keep talking to people and putting out the information that this world desperately needs to set humanity free. So thank you very much, man.
Excellent. Well, we'll probably look to have you on the show again in the future, Bill. And again, just really appreciate you coming on the show, and have an excellent evening. And thank you.
Anytime, man.